hence the comment on Robespierre.
Well, you know,
and I should have thrown in Madame Lafarge for good measure.
Well, they probably wouldn't not remember Madame Lafarge. So anyway, under any circumstances, this is a replay really of what's been going on. In fact, the French Revolution was the second of the great revolutions, and there's been continuing revolutions ever since then. There is a world revolution that has taken place, and certainly older in the 19th century it decimated Europe, and then during the 20th century, why, of course, it destroyed the Russian Empire. There was a revolution, Germany, Italy, in Turkey, it destroyed the Ottoman Empire. But the revolutions continued since then, and certainly the revolutions in Cuba, in China, and certainly in Iraq, Iran, and of course we brought the communists to power in Rhodesia. We brought the communist government to power in South Africa. We brought the communist government to power in Southwest Africa. But the average American doesn't understand that the real purpose of the American military and the foreign aid and the CIA is not to guarantee freedom about the world, but to install these dictatorships that will go along with a plan for the one world government. But the American people said, no, we're the good guys. We wouldn't do that, and we wouldn't. But there is an invisible government that controls from behind the scenes, made up of the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderbergers, the Council on Foreign Relations, less than 5,000 people, and yet they control all of the major banks and all of the major media outlets and all of the major publishing houses and most of the major corporations, and those they don't control, they're destroying today because they won't lend money to them, and they're going down. And we see this with, why is one electronic store doing well, the other one's going bankrupt? Why are certainly department stores doing well and others going bankrupt? Because they can't borrow money except for 15 or 20% interest, and they're just destroying the opposition. That's how they do it. They do it every 20 or 30 years, and they're doing it today, and the average person has no idea what's going on. What are your thoughts on that, Bob?
No, they don't. And, you know, the average mind is decent, and it cannot countenance the diabolical evil that these people represent. And, you know, I've used that phrase for 50 years when I discovered just how bad they are. And they're totally unconscionable. And you say to yourself, how can people do this sort of thing? The only explanation I've ever come up with is that they're Satan-driven. I can't think of any other reason for people to behave in such a way. And, you know, you've spoken about the history of wars being financed on both sides, almost every war for the last 1,000 years by the same group of people, financed on both sides. So people got to come to grips with there's something really wrong out there, and this is what it is. And we got to take our finances in America back from the Federal Reserve. We got to allow the big banks and insurance companies and the brokerage firms to go under. Let's let them go under. The shareholders have already lost most of their money. I mean, you got a stock like Citigroup is selling for $1.03. Incidentally, we shorted it at 42, which means we bet it was going to go down, which is really wonderful. But anyway, they're selling for pennies. These major companies, and the few that are still up are because the reason that they're stronger than they should be is the United States government's buying their stock. You know, the anointed companies, Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan Chase, etc. And so this is the kind of thing that we're facing. What do you do about it? You get a hold of the forecaster and show it to people. You get everybody you can find to listen to this broadcast and broadcast like it.
I thought it was so interesting.
They'll start to understand. You know, people come into me and they say, well, do you mind if I subscribe and email it to my whole family? And I say, no. Why not? Do it. I want people to find out what's going on. What do you think I'm doing at this ripe old age that I'm at? It's certainly not to make money, because where I'm going, the shrouds have no pockets.
All right, Marcus. I think it's really so interesting that the information's come out of where's all this money we're giving to AIG now, the American Investment Group. I think about $170 billion we've given to them. But where's that money gone? Why, it's gone to pay credit default swaps and derivatives. And who's getting the money on the other side? Why, Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan Chase. What we're doing is paying these big banks that created the whole problem. I wonder why. Well, maybe the fact that Henry Paulson was the CEO of certainly of Goldman Sachs and still apparently has a lot of stock holdings there. Maybe that's why he insisted on funneling all the money into AIG so they could funnel it to his old alma mater, his good friends in Wall Street. I have nothing against Wall Street and free enterprise, but these people are totally corrupt. We'll be right back in just a moment. Yeah, this is Dr. Stan back here. Our guest is Bob Chapman. We've been talking about the American Investment Group. We put, I think, close to about between $150 and $170 billion into that corporation, and probably it'll cost between $500 billion and $1 trillion to bail out all the derivatives they have. But they're paying the money through AIG. It's simply a fund for the taxpayers' money to go to Goldman Sachs and Deutsche Bank and J.P. Morgan Chase. So what we're doing is having the American taxpayers simply funnel money to these great banks. And, of course, these are the ones working within the Trilateral Commission. They're the elite banks. Of course, these are the people who run the world, who create wars, of course, create depressions. You go back and you read the history of the First World War and the part that J.P. Morgan played in that, and then the Second World War, the part that J.P. Morgan and GE, and, of course, many of our major corporations and Standard Oil, which is Rockefeller, how they all seem to be funding, Hitler not only before the war, but it was American corporations, GM and Ford and IT&T that were building the weapons for Hitler during the war with the permission of the parent organizations. Those weapons then were used to kill American boys, but we can't let the American people know that. Covered in a book called Trading with the Enemy by Charles Higham, or we carry a book called Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler here at Radio Liberty. We think it's an important book, and you need to get the information, and you need to prove me wrong. And if you can't, then you're going to have to accept the fact that we're up against organized evil, and from generation to generation to generation. These corporations, these banks, the people die, but the corporations continue. Well, Bob, go right ahead with what's going on. What's the latest thing? What's happening to the money supply? What's happening to unemployment? What's happening certainly to the status of the dollar? The dollar looks pretty good. Maybe we ought to invest in the dollar. After all, it seems to be climbing in comparison with all the rest of the currencies in the world. Isn't that right?
Right, and it's being caused by deleveraging still. People are still exiting from the yen carry trade. That's when people, up until a couple of years ago, would borrow yen and convert it into dollars and take those dollars and invest them, usually in the U.S. stock market or bonds, whichever. And they would get money very, very cheaply because the interest rate to borrow the yen was about 1/2 or 5/8 of 1%. And so that trade is being unwound because the yen got so strong, and it's weakened recently. But when they terminate those trades, they have to terminate them in dollars, and they have to buy the dollars to do that. And the deleveraging by hedge funds, because people were asking for their money back because they weren't satisfied with the performance. Those two factors have taken probably about 8 months to go to the extent of, I think, wiping out about 70% of both. So they still got a little ways to go, and that's why the dollar's not going down the way, you might think that it should go down. And so how long this will last, I don't know, but I think it'll be over by the end of the year. It may be a lot sooner. But that's why the dollar's strong. It's got nothing to do with the state of the American economy or finances. It's just an unusual event that's occurred, and it will be over. And when it's over, the dollar will go down.
Well, now
we just got to wait it out.
What's going to happen to the Swiss franc? They're having problems over there because they carry trade and inflating their money supply. Is the Swiss franc holding its value?
Yeah, it's doing pretty good. It traded around 116 today, and it's been as low as 122, and it's been as high as 1 franc to $1, but that was about a year ago. I think people who are long the franc or treasuries are off probably just a little bit.